So, the most common thing I get asked about living in France after do you eat baguettes every day? And duh, of course. But the second most common thing I get asked is what the cost of living is here. So, I want to share more what it actually feels like to live here in France according to cost, as rather than an actual cost breakdown, because honestly, math is hard. And, I'm not great at remembering numbers. I pretty much forget what I paid for something as soon as the transaction's done. People ask me what the cost of living is like here, and I'm like, "Well, I think croissants are a good price." So there will be no pie charts, no spreadsheets, no cost analysis in this video. I don't think I even know what a cost analysis is. And really, it's kind of an unanswerable question. While some costs are stable throughout the country, there's a lot that vary quite widely, like real estate, for example. So much also depends on your own frame of reference, where you came from, what your lifestyle is, and what your priorities are. So I'm not going to spend a lot on housing because I think I can safely assume that if you're watching me now, you probably have access to the internet and can find out for yourself. Because house prices vary, just like any other country, very much from region to region. And so it's going to cost you a lot more, say, to live in Paris or Nice, as opposed to the wilds of Brittany, where I am. So, in our case, because of the hyperinflated housing market that we left behind in Canada, the house we bought here is about a similar size in square footage and acreage, but it cost about a third of the value of our house in Canada. Beyond that, it's pretty hard to compare the two because we left behind a log house on a mountain dodging bears and traded it for a 300-year-old stone farmhouse in the field surrounded by cows. Property tax, however, is very different for us. We pay about half as much property tax as we did in Canada. And for that, we get city water, even though we're in the country. We get garbage pickup, recycling. We get free use of the dump, the déchetterie, which we didn't have before. So we're getting a little bit more for our tax dollars, we feel, than we did in Canada. So bottom line, energy here is expensive. In addition to the regular electrical consumption fees, there's also a monthly user fee of about 30 euros a month. So, with that combined with our usage, we're paying about two and a half times what we did for electricity back in Canada. And in winter, it doesn't feel like we get a lot of bang for our buck because our house is chilly. We've got a very inefficient, weak little pellet fueled hot water heater that keeps the house slightly above freezing. We hope to replace it with a heat pump and some solar panels sooner rather than later. But for now, it's bundling up and layering our sweaters and pulling out those good old Canadian toques. Overall, we've become much more conscious of our energy consumption. We line dry our clothes. We have our appliances on timers so that they can run during times when consumption costs are lower. And we just really think twice about how we're using our energy, which isn't a bad thing for the planet. It's just a little tougher for drying my clothes. This, though, is an example of how our habits have changed quite drastically since we've moved to France. So this one is also a toughie because prices are wacky all over the world now and things change so quickly. But in general, we find that dairy and eggs are very inexpensive for us. We do find that meat and seafood is a little bit pricier than we had back home. We're still wrapping our heads around the price of cheese, and we do spend a disproportionate amount of time walking around and coming up to each other, brandishing packages of cheese and going, I can't believe how cheap this is. We do find that the quality of food is quite a bit better, but what comes with that is fewer preservatives. And so things do not last as long as we're accustomed to. And so we have made a few rookie mistakes of things going bad before we had time to eat them. So we do work harder at planning carefully now. And not to be overlooked are the weekly markets. You can get a wonderful selection of local produce, cheeses, meats, wines, even other products, arts and crafts for really, really reasonable prices. Plus, you can carry a baguette around, pretend you're French, pretend you can hear accordion music in the background. Not that I've ever actually heard accordion music when I'm here yet, but I do have it in a loop soundtrack in my head when I'm at the markets. Restaurant prices seem to be at par with what we had back in Canada, although the food quality overall is better, we think. And so we do feel that we're getting better value for our money here. And on top of that, there's much less of a tipping culture here. You don't even see it as an option if you pay by credit card on the machine. And so that brings costs down as well. Fast food, though, is pricey, but you're in France, so why would you? Insurance, taxes, and home. Our car insurance for a mid-size SUV that's fairly recent is 750 euros a year. So that's fairly close to what we paid in Canada. But our house insurance is also about 750 euros a year, and that is less than 25% of what we paid in Canada. But again, this is very regional insurance, the type of house, so you can't really make a side by side comparison. But for us, that's a tremendous savings. We do pay a monthly health insurance supplement, which we didn't pay in Canada. But for us, we're getting health care that we didn't have access to before. So it's good value for our money. And that's why we came. Home upgrades and repairs, they feel pricey. We just had this one electric blind replaced, well, installed. It was a manual blind and we had it switched to electric, and that cost us close to 1,300 euro. So that was a lot of money. The handyman for hire concept isn't as common here due to stricter regulations around licensing and certification. And so that's another way that we do find we're spending more on home repair and maintenance. So, transportation and travel, gas prices are very high here. We spend much more than we did in Canada. Car prices for us is about the same as what we spent in Canada. We do find that there are a lot more transportation options than there were where we lived, but the prices were a bit surprising. Train travel is not as inexpensive as we had expected it to be. And surprisingly, for regional travel around Europe, it's usually a lot more cost effective to fly than to take the train. We do take ferries from time to time over to the Channel Islands or even to England, and we do find that ferry prices are higher than we were accustomed to in Western Canada, about 2 or 3 times what we paid there. So in general, I find that goods are expensive. Clothing, electronics, furniture, that kind of thing. For example, I'm a painter and my go-to art paint is about 50% more expensive here than it was in Canada. So my big newbie mistake was with this plastic pair of rubber boots I bought for just mucking around in the garden. Didn't even think to look at the price. I got them at the nearby home store. I bought this kind of thing over and over, so it never occurred to me that it would be more than 10 euro or something. And I didn't realize till I got to the counter that I paid 30 euro for them. This was when I was still translating, euro into Canadian dollar, and so I was horrified to realize that I spent probably $42 on a cheap pair of plastic boots that would have cost me 10 or $12 back home, and if I had known they cost that much, I would have at least made sure they had polka dots or light up soles or something. So every time I put on those boots, it's a nice reminder to me to slow down, check prices, check alternatives before I go barreling off to the cash register and spend a fortune on a pair of boots that aren't even pretty. So furniture is expensive here, but if vintage is your jam, then this is the motherland because antiques are plentiful and the prices are amazing. France also has a lot of great sources of used goods, and I'm going to do a whole episode on thrifting here because there's so many avenues that I didn't know about and didn't have access to before. Patisseries and boulangeries are also incredibly reasonably priced, and you can get amazing things for not much. This pain au raisin, that's my go-to pastry, was bought at a tiny independent boulangerie, and it was the best I've ever had. And I've sampled a lot of them, and it cost 80 centimes, so 80 cents. So in France, my money does stretch further in some places than in others, like, for example, the boulangerie or the cheese aisle. Meanwhile, in Canada, I never gave a second thought as to when I can use the dryer. The cost differences changed how we live and not just how we buy. Because of the high cost of power, we'll rewear clothes that in the past we may have just lazily thrown in the washer. We line dry, we set the thermostat a little bit lower and put on an extra sweater. I consult YouTube and ChatGPT when I have a problem with a drain rather than phoning a plumber right away. When we're considering buying something, we do take a pause and just ask ourselves if we really do need it, or rather, we just want it, and look at whether or not we can get it used or find a workaround. We don't go without, but we're just a little smarter about how we spend our money than we used to be. So, at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is your own personal situation, where you came from, and what your priorities are. I've spoken to Americans who have moved to France and who've found car prices to be much higher than they're used to, while for us coming from Canada, they were about the same. I've spoken to British people who say that food prices are a lot higher here. And again, for us, that's not what we found. The biggest jump for us was definitely electricity. We do pay more taxes here, but we're also seeing more in social and medical benefits, and those are the reasons that we moved here. So if your goal is to spend less on cheese, first of all, you're my people. But second of all, you may have found the right place. If your goal is to pay less taxes and have less bureaucracy, France may not be for you. France is an amazing, diverse country with so much to offer: architecture, history, art, culture, food. And have I mentioned cheese yet? Moving here meant giving up some things for sure, but so much of what we've gained can't even be measured. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.